Whether you're joining us in-house or watching from the comfort of your home, we welcome you to our service here at BAC. Don't forget to like, subscribe, not only to our YouTube channel, but our Facebook page as well, because we're called to evangelize to the world. Thanks and have a blessed day.
Welcome to the Thursday night BAC Bible study. My name is Jim Baird. I will be conducting the Bible study. And this teaching I titled Sin to the Full Measure. So when I started to reading the Bible on a daily basis, between 25 and 30 years ago, I don't remember which, in that vicinity, as I read through the Bible the first 2, 3 times, 4 times, there was 2 things that I found in the Bible that disturbed me more than anything else in the Bible. 2 things that disturbed me, and I just asked God what it was all about. So one was in the old covenant, one was in the new covenant. We'll start in the old covenant. In Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 31 through 34 reads, "The Lord said to me, see, I have begun to deliver Sihon and his country over to you. Now begin to conquer and possess his land. When Sihon and all his army came out to meet us in battle at Jahaz, the Lord our God delivered him over to us, and we struck him down together with his sons and his whole army." That's just one part. And then in Deuteronomy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7, it says, "Now we turned and went up along the road toward Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, with his whole army marched out to meet us in battle at Edrei. The Lord said to me, do not be afraid of him, for I have delivered him into your hands along with his whole army and his land. Do to him whatever you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon. So the Lord our God also gave into our hands," seeing how far I wanted to go, 7. "So the Lord our God also gave into our hands Og, king of Bashan, and all his army. We struck them down, leaving no survivors. At that time we took all his cities. There was not one of his 60 cities that we did not take from them. The whole region of Argob, Og's kingdom in Bashan. All these cities were fortified with high walls and with gates and bars, and there were also a great many unwalled villages. We completely destroyed them as we had done to Sihon, king of Heshbon, destroying every city, men, women, and children, but all the livestock and the plunder from the cities we carried off for ourselves." And then did that. 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 15, 1 through 3. This is where it really, we just read about them killing every person, man, woman, and children. But here in 1 Samuel 15, he's talking about that. And it says, verses 1 through 3, "Samuel said to Saul, I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came out of Egypt. Now go back, attack the Amalekites, and totally destroy all that belonged to them. Do not spare them. Put to death man, woman, children, and infants, and sheep and camels and donkeys." And if you look up the word infant, it actually in the Hebrew, it means nursing babies. That's what disturbed me. When God told them to destroy every man, woman, child, and even the nursing babies. I had to adjust my understanding of God, and like I said, it just disturbed me when I read that. And then I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 13. So this, before I give you the answer, I'm going to go to Matthew 13, because they actually, both these things that disturbed me, Old Covenant, New Covenant, actually have the same answer. So Matthew chapter 13, and I'm going to read verses 10 through 15. Matthew 13, 10 through 15. Now this was when Jesus was teaching. When he was teaching, he would often use parables to teach. And one time while he was teaching, well, back up a little bit. So every time he taught, even when he wasn't using parables, when he taught, his disciples would always come to him afterwards and ask him what he meant by what he said. But especially when he was teaching by parables, they would come and ask him, what does that parable mean? So in verse 10, the disciples came to him and asked him, why do you speak to the people in parables? He replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become callous. They hardly hear with their eyes, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. So, in my mind, I'm like, well, Jesus, that's the whole reason you came here. You came here so that, and then in Mark, let me read what Mark says. Mark chapter 4, I'm just going to read verse 12. It says, they may be ever seeing but never perceiving, and ever hearing but never understanding. Otherwise, they might turn and be forgiven. Forgiven is salvation. And actually, in the King James, it does say, I believe it does say saved. I thought I had it in my notes, but I don't. And I'm like, okay, Jesus, you came here to save people, and now you're talking in parables so that they can't understand and be saved. I don't understand. That disturbed me. So we'll go back to Genesis chapter 15, and this is the answer to the question. So one night, it was actually a Sunday afternoon, I was listening to somebody on one of the Christian TV stations, either Cornerstone or Trinity, and this is like 25 years ago. And I don't remember who I was listening to, but they were done and somebody else came on. And I was listening to this other person, but I was doing something, and I was just half listening to them. And it was a man and a woman. Their ministry was helping married people stay married, helping married Christians to stay married. That was their ministry. And as I was half listening to him, this man either read this verse or he quoted this verse. And as soon as I heard these words, it was the answer to the question that I had about those two things that disturbed me. So this is the verse. It says, in the fourth generation. Now this is when God's talking to Abraham. This is where he actually promised him the land that he was walking in. So this is where the promised land became the promised land because of this. And it says, in the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. And when I heard that, the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure, it wasn't, I didn't have to think about it. It was just the Holy Spirit gave me the understanding of what that was talking about. So God knew that the Amorites were going to sin to the full measure, but he still allowed them to do it and gave them 400 years to do that. So these people that were possessing the land that we call Israel today, they were not godly people, they were evil people, and they were sinful people. And God allowed them to sin to the full measure. And once they sinned to the full measure, they were at that point no earthly good to God for anything, them or their children. So he had the Israelites kill them all, even their nursing babies, because they were no earthly good to God. They had sinned to the point where God said, I'm through with you. There's no second chance. You're done. These people are going to kill you, and I'm going to give their land to you. So I'm going to go to Numbers chapter 13, and we're going to look at a little bit about that. Numbers chapter 13. Numbers 13. I'm going to read verses 1 and 2, and then I'm going to read verses 30 through 33. Numbers 13. One and 2. The Lord said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders. So I'm going to show you here where the Israelites did the exact same thing. They sinned to the full measure. So then I'm going to go to verses 30 through 33 in chapter 13. Having a hard time. It says, we saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak, coming from Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. So these are the spies that Moses had sent out to check out the land. And then in chapter 14, verses 26 through 30, it says, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, how long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites, so tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very thing that I heard you say. So over and over again, once they came out of Israel, once the Israelites came out of Egypt, 3 days after they came out of Egypt, they were complaining about water. And 10 times they complained and complained, up to 10 times. And after they complained the 10th time, God said, I'm through with you. I am through with you. You have just sinned to your full measure. It doesn't use those words, but that's exactly what they did. How long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard their complaints of these grumbling Israelites. So tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very thing I heard you say. So 3 days after walking through the Red Sea on dry ground, they said to Moses, you brought us out here so that we and our children and our livestock will die in the wilderness. And they said that 9 more times, or close to 9 more times. I'm not sure if it was exactly 10 times, but they did grumble 10 times. Verse 29 says, in this wilderness, your bodies, now this is God speaking, I will do to you the very thing I heard you say. You're going to die in the wilderness. In this wilderness, your bodies will fall. Every one of you, 20 years old or more, who was counted in the census, who has grumbled against me. Not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand to make your home, except Caleb and son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. Those were the 2 spies that came back with a good report. The 10 other spies came back and said, we can't do it because we look like grasshoppers compared to them. As for your children that you said would be taken as plunder, I will bring them in to enjoy the land you have rejected. But as for you, your bodies will fall in the wilderness. Your children will be shepherds here for 40 years, suffering for your unfaithfulness until the last of your bodies lie in the wilderness. Once again, I want to see how far I wanted to go. Okay, so I did that. So once again, to the Israelites coming out of Egypt, they did the exact same thing. They sinned to the full measure, to the point where God said, I'm done with you. I promised Moses this land, I promised Abraham this land 400 years ago, and here I am trying to lead you people into this very land that I promised Abraham 400 years ago, and you're rejecting. You don't have faith, you don't believe me, so you're going to die in the wilderness, and your children are going to get to go in and take the land. This isn't in my notes, but it's coming to my mind. If you go back and read the story of when they did go into the land and they marched around Jericho and the walls fell down, well, before they did that, they sent spies into the land one more time. And these spies went into Jericho, and there was a woman there that hid them. Our Bibles, you call her a harlot. Most people call her a harlot. But if you look up in the Hebrew, the same word that's translated harlot could also be translated innkeeper. Once I seen that, I no longer call the woman a harlot. She may have been a harlot. I don't know that, but she may not have been a harlot. She may have just been an innkeeper, which would make sense because these spies went in to check out the city, and then they went to the inn because they were going to spend the night there. I don't think they were going to a harlot. They went to an innkeeper. Anyways, and this woman hid them for the night, hid them, and the officials of Jericho came looking for them, and she saved them. But before that happened, she told these spies, back when you guys came out of Egypt, we heard about what happened, about how the Red Sea was dried up and you guys marched across on dry land, and the Egyptian army followed you and were destroyed. And she told them, when that happened, our hearts melted within us. We had no strength to fight. So God prepared Jericho and their military to be overrun, to be taken over, simply because they weren't going to fight. She told them, we had no heart to fight because of what we heard about your God. Your God is God. And it took 400 years for that to happen. No, I'm sorry. Anyways, it didn't happen whenever it should have happened, when it could have happened, took 40 years, because of their unbelief. God prepared the city of Jericho to be taken without much of a fight, and they didn't do it because they didn't believe God once again. Now I want to see where I'm at here. Psalm 78, verse 40. Psalm 78. Actually, I'm going to go to Psalm 78:40. It says again and again, this is talking about that. And if you go back to Psalm 78, even 77, 76, there's a couple chapters there where it's writing about what happened, about what the Israelites did. And here's the one verse, says again and again, they put God to the test. They vexed the Holy One of Israel. And the King James says they limited the Holy One of Israel. They limited God because of their lack of faith. They vexed God because of their lack of faith, talking about him wanting to take them into the promised land. He wasn't able to do it because of their lack of faith. There's a lesson in that for us. In order for God to give the promises that Jesus paid the price for us to be able to receive, salvation, healing, blessings, we have to have faith to believe it. And if you don't have faith to believe it, or you don't even know about it because you never went looking for it, you are limiting or you're vexing God through your lack of faith. And all I have to do is go to Mark chapter 4. It says that Jesus went back to his own hometown, and says there he could do no mighty works because of their lack of faith. Because of the lack of faith of the people, Jesus was not able to heal them. Your faith is very important. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. We receive the promises of God through faith and patience. If you want to receive the promises of God, you have to have faith in the promises. Each and every promise. It's not like I believe in God, therefore I have faith. No, you have to have faith in the promises that you're trying to, or that you need. And that's exactly where the Israelites failed. They did not have faith in the promise that God was going to take them into the promised land. Compare that to us. I don't even need faith to believe that God can do something. I don't need faith to believe that God can do anything. All I have to do is believe that there's a God. If he can create the universe and everything in it, he can heal me or he can bless me, whatever. But he says that we have to have faith. So he has his will, and then we have our will. We have to get our will aligned up with his will, get our faith aligned up with his will to receive his promises. Like I said, the Israelites, they watched the 10 plagues from Goshen, where they were living in Egypt, in Goshen, where the plagues didn't come, but the plagues hit Egypt. And they seen all that. They didn't read about it, they seen it. And then they walked across the sea on dry ground. Turn around and watch the most powerful army in the world at that time be destroyed in minutes. And so I think about that. I think, well, they knew that God could give them the promised land, but they didn't think that God would. I suspect it had something to do with 400 years of being slaves. They still seen themselves as slaves, and for whatever reason, they didn't think that God would do it. They have to know that God could do it. If he can dry up the Red Sea, he can take you into this land that he wants to give to you. But they didn't believe. Now, this is just my comment, me thinking about all that. Apparently, they didn't think that God would. For whatever reason, whether it was because they were seeing themselves as slaves or whatever, they didn't think that God would. They had to know that God could. So the problem wasn't they didn't think God could, they didn't think God would. So for us today, do you believe that God can heal you, or do you believe that he has healed you? It's not hard to believe that God can do something. It's hard to believe that it's already been done. Peter said, by his stripes ye were healed, past tense, it's already been done. Getting off the point. So I want to go to Psalms, back to Numbers 14, in verse 22. It says, not one of those who saw my glory and the signs I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, but who disobeyed and tested me 10 times. 10 times they said to Moses, you brought us out here in the wilderness to die, so that we, our children, and our animals will die. There's no water, there's no food, there's grumbling. And God had enough of it. Going back to the God saying about the Amorites, the sin of the Amorites has not yet been filled. The big picture in all this, now this is just me meditating on it. The big picture in all this is God has a plan, and in this plan, there's going to be a young virgin give birth to a child, a boy child, and that child is going to be the Son of God, and he's going to be the Redeemer of the whole world. God was trying to protect somebody in the human race to be able to do that. If you go back to why did God flood, Noah's flood, it says that every thought of every man was evil continually. And it's using the word man, not talking about male, it's talking about man, the human race. Every thought of every man was evil continually. If every thought of every man was evil continually, where was he going to find a virgin to give birth to his son? And this was in the year, it was 1,600 years after Adam. So in 1,600 years, the human race had degraded to the point where every thought of every man was evil continually. So what did he do? He wiped out the earth. He wiped out all mankind. Started all over again with Noah and his family. So and I'm saying that because the reason he did that was trying to provide a virgin to give birth to his son. It wasn't like he was just doing this to be evil or mean. He was doing it trying to preserve the human race. So back when I was a kid, if somebody got cancer, usually the first thing they would do is cut them open and try to cut the cancer out. Today, they don't do that like they used to. They would use radiation or even medicines to try to eradicate the cancer. So what God was doing here, he was eradicating the cancer in the human race by destroying those people that had cancer, that there was no hope left for them. Matthew 23. So this is now I'm going to answer the part about Jesus in the new covenant. Why was he teaching in parables? Because there were some people in the crowd that weren't going to get saved. And so he spoke in parables so that they could not understand it because God said they're not getting saved. And so he had Jesus speak in parables so that they couldn't understand it and be saved. And who was the people? It was the religious leaders. So I'm going to pick it up in Matthew 23. And I'm going to read verses 29. I'm going to do 29 through 39. It's a lot of reading, but to get my point. It says, "Woe to you, teachers," this is Jesus speaking, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets." Jesus says, "So you testify against yourself that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Go ahead then and complete what your ancestors have started." So their ancestors started out killing the prophets, and they started out filling up their sin, filling up their sin, filling up their sin. And so now here Jesus is. The prophets were prophesying about the Messiah. Jesus was the Messiah. Here the Messiah was on the face of the earth, and these religious leaders didn't believe that he was the Messiah. They were the ones that had the word. The common man didn't have a Bible. It was all on scrolls. The common person didn't have a Bible. And so they went to the synagogue to get the word. These people, the religious elite, they had the scrolls to read, and they should have known that Jesus was the Messiah. Picking back up in verse 33, it says, "You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell?" Therefore, they were condemned to hell. Why? Because beginning with their ancestors, and for hundreds of years, thousands of years, they kept killing the prophets. These people just killed John the Baptist, and they were going to kill Jesus. "I am sending you prophets and," let me back up, "you snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? Therefore, I am sending you prophets and sages and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue them from town to town. And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zacharias, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly I tell you, all this will come upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent to you. How often have I longed to gather your children together as hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate, for I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So these religious leaders in Jesus' day had sinned to the point, them and their ancestors had sinned to the point where they weren't going to be saved. It wasn't going to work for them. And so that's why he was speaking in parables, so that they wouldn't be able to hear it, they wouldn't understand, and they wouldn't be saved or healed. In their effort to keep us from speaking to the Gentiles so that they may be saved, in this way, they always heap up their sins to the limit. The wrath of God has come upon them at last. So once again, it says the sins to the limit, sins to the fill. They filled the sins of their ancestors, and them filled their cup or bowl, whatever the sins was measured on, and they put themselves in a position where they weren't going to be saved. They weren't going to be able to be saved. And so Jesus spoke to them in parables. In Ephesians, it talks about filling up let me see if I can find it. Ephesians chapter 3, the title of starting in verse 14 in the NIV, that has the title Prayer for the Ephesians. And you come down to verse 19, it says, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. So here it's being filled to the measure, but it's not with sin, it's with the fullness of God. That's our prayer, that we could be filled to the measure with the fullness of God. But anyways, going back to the religious leaders, as I said, they weren't going to be saved because of all the sin that they and their ancestors had committed. And that's where we're going to end it tonight. Father, I come before you this evening once again, thanking you for this teaching, thanking you for the understanding. I pray that the hearers were able to follow along with what I was saying, and I pray that they understand. I pray that the Holy Spirit will give them the understanding, and hopefully if somebody else was bothered by these two things, that they will have peace just as it gave me peace. I pray this with the authority of Jesus. Amen.
Hi, my name is Francesca. I'm the administrator here at the BAC community. I hope that you enjoyed today's gathering. I would like to take a moment to encourage you to check out our website. It has all the faith community news and updates, as well as information on the BAC community. If you feel the desire to help support the ministry, there is an option on our website to help support us. Log on to bacwn.com and click the tab called Support on the top of the page. Also, if you would have a need for prayer, guidance, or benevolent help, email us and someone from the leadership team will contact you. If you have a question, just ask online and we will see that your request will be answered. Again, thank you so much for gathering with us today.